Welcome back to the Transporter CFB podcast and YouTube channel presented by Note to Context CFB. We're here today with our 2023 Mountain West Preview podcast episode, and today I'm joined by Liam and Karan. How are you guys doing?
Phenomenal.
Also doing phenomenal. We got to talk Mountain West football while the Pac-12
Sir.
erupts. What's better than that?
The number one West Coast conference in the sport now, apparently. But just first, before we dive into all of that, just want to remind you guys that our 2023 preview magazine is still up for sale, $9.99. Link can be found at our site. It's got in-depth coverage of every FBS program, as well as plenty of feature pieces on players, FCS coverage, superlatives, and much more along with that. Also, be sure to use code PORTAL at Home Field Apparel, and then our MyBookie access will also be linked down in the description of this video. But again, the meat and potatoes of it, kind of the major storylines to set the scene for the Mountain West this season. You have Boise State is the perennial people's champion, yes, but Fresno State's risen to power recently, stolen the crown away from them somewhat. The Bulldogs are losing a lot of pieces. Boise State returns a lot. There might be a power shift up there. Air Force, another strong contender as well, despite having to deal with some changes to the triple option this season. Wyoming looks like they're going to field an elite defense, but can that offense support them to be a contender? San Diego State's always pesky. And then you got some rising powers like San Jose State, UNLV, Colorado State, looking to kind of make a mark this season. So to start us out, Liam, what's the biggest conference game to watch this season?
Yeah, so the biggest conference game that I'm looking at is actually going to be Week 11. It's Wyoming, UNLV. We'll talk about these teams more in depth later, but just TLDR on this one. Wyoming's going to be really good. I think UNLV is going to be a lot better than people expect. Fascinating matchup here between Wyoming's defense and UNLV's go-go offense. So that's going to be must-see TV for two teams that could be in a spot competing for a spot in the Mountain West Championship game. How can you not watch that? It's must-see TV.
And then for you, Karan?
Yeah, so I went with Fresno State at San Jose State November 11th, deep into the season. These are two teams that have been good recently, and I think they'll both have pretty good chances to play in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. So that'll be a game with a lot of it'll be worth a lot down the stretch. Offense is going to be there. San Jose State has a nice passing attack. Fresno State, Jeff Tedford, they're always pretty good. So yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with that one.
Yeah, and for me, I kind of went with the more chalk pick, I guess. But Air Force at Boise State last week in the regular season. You've got kind of the two presumed main contenders in the conference this season alongside Fresno. And it's just going to be a lot of very physical, tough matchups in the past between these two sides. Potentially a Mountain West berth on the line in this game, or maybe they're going to be rematching each other the very next week. Who knows? Regardless, should be a very competitive game on the Smurf turf out there. But another thing the Mountain West has this season, they've got a lot of opportunities to pick up some huge non-conference wins and maybe build some more momentum for the conference moving forward as all this realignment talk kind of floats around. So, Liam, what non-conference game are you really keeping an eye on?
I mean, Boise State has a loaded non-conference schedule, so there's a few games that you could pick from for there. I got to go with their week one matchup where they're going up to Washington. Big game in Seattle. It's a good chance to see how Boise State is coming into the season after an up and down season last year, albeit they won 10 games, but it wasn't very pretty. We'll see how Boise State fares this year. Great test off the bat. See how you shape up against one of the best offenses in the country. We got to see Boise State's secondary. So much talent there that I can't wait to talk about in a few minutes, but Boise State, Washington's going to be a really good matchup. I think Boise State's going to make that one a little closer than people think. I think Washington wins, but yeah, great chance to look at Boise State and what they bring to the table in week one. So, I mean, again, you got to be watching that game.
Yeah. Yeah, I went with UCF at Boise State the week after. I think Boise State at Washington is going to be a great game, but realistically, Washington's going to be the favorite there. With UCF, I think that'll be a close game. UCF always a fast team. Boise State, Talon Green, they're going to be explosive. I think that one will come down to the wire. I like Boise State in that matchup, but I'm really excited to see how those two teams fare against each other, and I think it could definitely be a high scoring game.
Yeah, and that's a game that UCF probably desperately needs entering the big first season, the Big 12, some early season momentum. And a big game like that would be good for him. I went a little bit also week one alongside that Boise State Washington game, but Texas Tech visiting Wyoming, a very unique. Not a lot of Power Five teams make the trip out there. We saw Missouri do it in 2019, and they fell in the first game of the season. Texas Tech walks into town. A lot of hype entering this season. It's just after that end to last season, the bowl went over Ole Miss. A lot of returning talent. A lot of people thinking they're a dark horse in the Big 12, potentially a double-digit win team if all things go right. But things going right would require them to win at Wyoming against an incredibly physical, tough defensive team that is going to make this an ugly game. 1 week before Texas Tech plays Oregon, maybe they're looking ahead. Maybe they get got sleeping a little bit up there. Who knows? It would be a major win for the Mountain West degree, though, going forward if they can win that. But moving along, kind of over the course of the Mountain West season, it's definitely a conference of parity. We see a lot of upsets kind of year to year. What do we think is going to be the big conference upset this season? Liam, we'll start with you.
Oh shoot, where's looking in conference? I can't say like Hawaii's beating Oregon.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Go with that.
Yeah, please no. I will concede that to one of you guys. I mean the carnage is obvious what's gonna happen in conference play. Trying to think of something that happens in non-conference stuff that comes to mind. UNLV beating Vanderbilt, I think is very doable. Idaho beating Nevada, I mean, I wouldn't even call that an upset, but to the casual fan, and FCS team being a FBS team is an upset on technical terms, but Idaho's a top 5 team in the FCS. I don't know if I want to call that an upset. Sticking in the FCS though, in the Big Sky in particular, I think Eastern Washington could give Fresno State a run for their money early on season. I'm kind of lower on Fresno State, a bit of a spoiler there, and I can't wait to explain why later. But those 3 non-conference games, I would really keep my eye on. Whether you call the Idaho one an upset or not, that's up to you. I'm just the guy talking.
Yeah, I think I'd say that's an upset if it were to happen.
Yeah, most people would say it's an upset, but
yeah,
I honestly
us,
would not.
Yeah. If you pay attention to Idaho football, I think it wouldn't be surprising.
It's like last year on the upset special show when I got blasted for having Incarnate Word upsetting Nevada, and then Incarnate Word boat raced them, and like I was just, it ain't me. I didn't really think it was an upset, but I was just playing the game.
Yeah,
the people need to listen to you, Liam. That's what I'm learning here.
And they hated Jesus for telling the truth.
But yeah, your pick.
Yeah, I went Boise State at Utah State. I think Utah State could come away with that one. People forget Utah State's only 1 year removed from winning the Mountain West as a whole. They still have some strong pieces on both sides of the ball and good coaching. I think Boise State's kind of the team to beat here, as we'll continue to talk about. But I think if any team's going to give them a run for their money, that might be a surprise to some. It would be Utah State within the conference.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sticking on a similar note. Colorado State hosting Boise State. They played them tough in recent memory a couple times. I think Jay Norvell last season was a bit rocky, but you saw some promise out of that team, and there is talent to work with for sure. I think they can catch Boise State in a kind of a tough position right before a bye week, but you just come off potentially a tough game with San Jose State and Memphis back to back. I think it could be a tough stretch, and they might pick up a loss before that bye week. Maybe it's their only loss of the season, but I think it's going to be a tough one in Fort Collins for Boise State. But kind of transitioning a little bit to players to watch this season, I'll go ahead and start it off to keep on the Colorado State track. 2 offensive players to watch inside the conference this season. Number 1, Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. One of those kind of talented under the radar players that I was kind of mentioning earlier, over 1,000 yards last season. As the team improves, he should only garner more attention. 6'2", he can win in jump balls deep. Also has some good athleticism as well. And then quarterback San Jose State, Chevin Cordero, Hawaii transfer, had over 3,000 yards, 32 touchdowns last season. The offense is geared perfectly to kind of his skill set. The defense is concerned with San Jose State, but more than likely you can trust this offense this year to at least keep them in games with points. And that's in large part due to Cordero. But I'll kick it over to you, Liam. Who are 2 guys you're kind of watching this season?
Yeah, the first guy, I'm going to Boise State's deep and talented running back room. The first guy that stands out to everyone's George Holani. The best back on that team is is now true sophomore Ashton Jonty. Not sure exactly how you say it because I've heard both ways, but Ashton's one heck of a player. He's a menace. He ran for about 5.5 yards per carry last season, 7 rushing touchdowns, has really strong receiving to this Boise State offense as well, which they're really going to need now that Caples is out. So Ashton's ability to catch the ball, I think he had over 10 yards to catch last season, is huge. He's someone that was well on my radar going into last season. He lived up to the hype and more. He's shifty, he's explosive, he's nasty. He's got surprising, like he'll just hurdle you at the most random time. It's disgusting. He's an NFL back, and he's the best NFL prospect that Boise State has, in my honest opinion. And then my second offense player to watch is Ricky White, wide receiver at UNLV. He's playing with Doug Brumfield. He's in the go-go offense with Coach Marion. He's a Power 5 talent. He was at Michigan State. They're going to throw the ball, and they're going to find Ricky a lot. Doug and Ricky have a really strong connection that I spoke with Doug about. These two are always in sync. They know what each other are thinking at all times, and Doug's going to look for him often, whether he's going over the top vertically or he's flying him on a nice little out route to the sideline, just moving the chains. Look out for Ricky White to have a big time season.
Yeah, and that leads into my first offensive player. I went with Doug Brumfield, quarterback, UNLV. He's such a fun player. I mean, you look at him, 6'6", 225, dual threat. It's like you're making a Madden quarterback. Unfortunately, he struggled with injuries over the last 3 years, I like to say. Last 2 years he's been starting. So as long as he can stay healthy, I mean, he's got the arm, he's got the legs. Ricky White's out there. They brought in Brennan Marion, Barry Odom on the coaching staff. So there's so many pieces that I think UNLV definitely does have the chance to be that breakout team. And I think if Brunfield can stay healthy, he's got a really good season in the works. And then my second player, I went with Trayton Welch, tight end from Wyoming. He's a bit of an underrated player, but I think he is arguably the best tight end in the conference. Really well-rounded player who, on a Wyoming offense that they're typically not very exciting. You know, they like to pound the rock, throw it short. He's kind of like the perfect, he's the perfect fit there. Good short target, consistent hands. And yeah, I think if Wyoming is as good as some people think they can be, he's in for a monster season.
Yeah, for sure. And then flipping over to the other side of the ball, I'll go ahead and start it out just with two guys that definitely caught my eye, kind of for different reasons. But Cam Lockridge over at Fresno State. First off, I just think one of the best names you can have as a defensive back, just overall, especially the Lockridge. But led the team with 5 interceptions last season, 2 in that title game win over Boise State. The Fresno State this season, some moving pieces on offense. They expect to still be, explosive, but it's not going to be the same level it was in years past. That defense can have to pick up the slack. I think Lockridge is one of those guys that can really carry that torch for them. And then DJ Schramm over at Boise State, first and foremost, again, an incredible year. Definitely be on the lookout for him out in the field this season. But also the team 117 tackles last season. Just a real leader, veteran leader for that defense that I think you're going to see flying all over the field for Boise State yet again this season.
Yeah, so I'm going with 2 safeties. I'm going with Trey Taylor at Air Force and Ike Larson at Utah State. These are just 2 really good safeties, the class of this conference. But Trey Taylor made all Mountain West second team last year, had 69 nice total tackles, 4 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. You often see his closing speed on display, and he ain't afraid to hit hard. Ike Larson, impressive, like explosiveness. He just gets the ball real quickly. He's just got a nose for a ball. He's always around it. He's blowing plays up. He had 4 interceptions last year, a pick 6 as well, a few pass breakups. He's in line for a big season, and with that, it's going to come some NFL draft hype for Mr. Larson. I think he's a day 3 guy, but I think he's someone that you could look at in a few years and see. Hey, I remember watching Ike Larson in college, and it's good to see Ike Larson, safety, Utah State, being said during Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, for sure. I went with Devon Harris, defensive lineman at Wyoming. Wyoming's front 7 is stacked this year, and although Oluwamatosho is on the way out, I think Harris will be able to step up. He had 36 pressures last year, 8 sacks, and in a bigger role, I think he'll definitely be able to build off of those numbers and maybe get his way into NFL draft talks. Then the other guy I went with is a bit more underrated, Dante Martin, cornerback, New Mexico. He's their best player on defense, and I think among the Mountain West corners, he's certainly up there. He's a good player in man coverage, well-rounded, good in press, and New Mexico typically has pretty good defensive backs compared to the rest of their roster, and I think he's next in line to have a strong season.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of the name of the game with the Mountain West, as it's unfortunately one of the conferences is not talked about as much, but the under the radar names to watch this season. I'll start us off. Defensive end Muhammad Kamara at Colorado State. Great stat line last season of 16 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. Kind of spurring the pros to come back for another season under Norvell and potentially, build off of what they had last season and have things come together this year. So definitely keep an eye out for him. Might be one of the best pure pass rushers in the conference. And then Mark Redmond out of San Diego State, tight end. Not necessarily the most productive player up to this point, but Brady Hoke this offseason saying that he wants to go to more 12 personnel, use the tight end a little bit more. So expect Redmond's production to pick up. And if it does, you would expect this offense to do so as well. And in turn, the Aztecs probably to be a conference title contender as well.
My first guy is I've got to go to Jay Norvell's offense. I've got to find someone that was what was in mind here. And it's someone that I watched a little bit last year, but never really took more notice of. And, in the past few weeks, I've really taken a liking to wide receiver at Colorado State, Justice Ross Simmons. He has a basketball background as well. He's 6'2"-ish, 6'3". He's up there, tall, vertical threat. What's going to happen in Jay Norvell offense, as we saw plenty with Nevada, a lot of receiving talent comes in and a lot of them produce. So while Torrey Horton's going to go out and get his, a guy like Justice Ross Simmons is also going to be utilized plenty. Last season, he had 26 grabs for 424 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, 16.3 yards per catch in Norvell's offense in your first year out playing college football. Pretty dang good. Expect his stats to rise plenty. Nasty ball skills. Again, a good vertical threat. He'll be utilized in the red zone ton. Dog is barking. That's unfortunate. My other player to watch was Sei Oladipo, safety at Boise State, versatile player. He's nasty. He's tough. He's also a very fun watch. I'll let you go on.
All right, yeah. So I went with Harrison Whaley, running back at Wyoming. He transferred in from Northern Illinois. He had a very productive career at Northern Illinois, over 500 yards each of the last 3 years, and most recently 900 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. He's going to come in and be that perfect bell cow running back to pound the rock for Wyoming and help them move the ball. And I like that transfer addition a lot. And then on the other side, I went with a defensive player, Peter Manuma, safety Hawaii. He wasn't a guy that was on my radar until I worked on their magazine preview, but he really impressed me when I was looking through their stats and some of their game tape. He put up 70 tackles and 2 interceptions as a true freshman, started 8 games. He really came into his own down the stretch, although Hawaii's team wasn't that great. He was a bit of a bright spot there, and I think he has a lot to work with going into his sophomore season.
Yeah, I think your dog's a pretty big Jay Norvell, Justice Ross Simmons fan, I believe is what that means.
The dog ain't a big Jay Norvell fan. I'll tell you that right now. I might be a big Justice Ross Simmons fan. Norvell, we've got beef with him. I don't like how he left Nevada. My dog doesn't like it either. Yeah, I'm sorry to Colorado State fans. Just an honest guy.
Fair
I like
enough.
Justice Ross Simmons though. Can't wait to see what happens.
Fair enough. Well, yeah. Now we'll get into the true meats and potatoes of things, though. And I'll let you start us off, Liam. Starting off with kind of some of the main contenders in the conference.
So contenders. Well, in our season preview magazine, I wrote about Boise State. I think they're class of the conference. I think they're up there for one of the top 3 teams in the Group 5 this season. They're the team to beat. Right behind them, though, I think you have Air Force and Wyoming that I'd put up as those next 2 really strong teams. They do it with they have that identity of just great defense, and they'll do enough on the offensive side to make things happen. I kind of hinted it earlier. I think Fresno State's actually in line for some regression this season. I also non-love with San Diego State, another team that's out here with the identity of we're going to win with great defense, and we'll figure it out on the offense side. I like what San Jose State has to offer. I'm intrigued to see what they have, and Utah State and UNLV are also like right there in the mix as well. Like Karan said earlier, Utah State's only a year removed from winning the conference. Still a good team with plenty of talent. We talked about Ike Larson. They've got plenty more that I can't wait to talk about, and I think UNLV is going to be a real sleeper in this conference, and I'm very excited to talk about them when we eventually get to their portion of this podcast.
Yeah, I think kind of so. Yeah, and that upper echelon, I guess we would say Boise State, Wyoming, Air Force, and then San Diego State slash Fresno, kind of on that fringe, and then dark horse teams looking at San Jose State, Utah State, UNLV, maybe even throw some Colorado State in there, something like that.
Yeah. If
Kind
it's
of
like
out of
sorry, if it's like a true tiers thing, for me, it's like Boise State, then you're looking, and then you're going down, and then you're going to the Wyoming and the Air Force, and then we're getting to that third tier where I
Yeah,
think you
but I
could kind of mash them up.
yeah, I wouldn't say the gaps are too big though, which is the great part about the Mountain West. I mean, there's obviously Boise State looks like the best team, Air Force is up there, but it's really any man's conference aside from maybe Hawaii and New Mexico.
because I
It'd
will,
be
yeah,
nice.
I will. We'll be sure to touch on them later on for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it's kind of Boise State. It seems like the only thing that's going to necessarily ruin their season would be if Taylor Green maybe doesn't take those next steps in the passing game and they're too one dimensional. And you also look at the schedule. While Boise State typically challenges themselves, which is it's been their reputation for a while now. But there's no front loaded or back loaded. Your toughest Mountain West games at the end of the season after that bye week, starting with Wyoming October 28th, at Fresno, at Utah State Air Force. Beginning the season, as you touched on earlier with that non-conference schedule, Washington, UCF, at Memphis, San Diego State also thrown in there for good measure, and then some tricky ones against San Jose and Colorado State. I have concerns about Boise State being consistent throughout the season, especially with that schedule. I think it's still good enough to get them into the Mountain West title game, but I think they're going to suffer a couple losses that probably keep them out of any form of New Year's Six Bowl just because of the caliber that they're facing this season. I'm a little bit higher on Fresno, I guess, than you are, Liam, purely because I'm a big Mikey Keene believer, and I think he's going to come in there and match what they want to do offensively pretty well. They'll have to tweak some things for sure. I agree that it'll certainly be a step back. I don't think they're going to be conference title contenders. I think that'll belong to Air Force. I think Air Force just is maybe one of the more complete teams in this conference. Again, interested to see how they do changing with the triple option and how they adjust to that. But I see Air Force as probably being right up there with Boise. I think San Diego State also is kind of taking a little bit of a step back despite some potential with Jalen Maiden. But I am a big Wyoming believer. And I think if anybody outside of Air Force or Boise is going to do it, it'll be Wyoming. They got to fix that offense. But I personally think that defense is going to be elite this season. But kind of moving on from those top teams, Liam, you definitely wanted to get in on specifically UNLV. So I'll kind of segue you to UNLV for sure.
Oh, okay. So wait, do we want to like go in depth on each team too after this, or what?
I mean,
Because
we're
if
going
if
to.
okay, because if
Yeah,
so, I there's other stuff I still want to say about previous teams, but going in on UNLV and why I'm in on UNLV, the additions. Okay, so last season UNLV went out there, started red hot, 4-1. That doesn't happen at UNLV. That's weird. Everyone took notice. They're on the verge of making the bowl game. It doesn't happen. Like Karan said, Brumfield dealing with injuries. Team never really found their footing after that. They got blown out by San Jose State. That's 4-2. That's a string of 5 straight losses, I believe it was, or 6 straight losses. I'm not really a numbers guy. I think it was 6. That was deflating for this team, but it put salt in the wound. It put a taste in their mouth that we gotta get back to what we could be. New coaching staff coming in with Coach Barry Odom and Brennan Marion is excellent news for the offense. We've talked about Brumfield. We have talked about Ricky White. We haven't really talked about Coach Brennan Marion, who's going to implement this innovative and flashy and fun go-go offense. They're going to be high-paced, high-tempo. They're going to throw it all over the yard. They're going to run it over you too. Doug Brumfield, his skill set will be utilized very nicely with his large lefty arm being complemented by his tough running ability. There's going to be different guys that show up and show out, like maybe a Landon Rogers breaks out receiver too. The defense, I do have question marks about, but if we're talking about a team that goes out there in a conference with so many defensive-minded teams that lack really strong offenses, Boise State or UNLV could just score time and time again. I think they'll be able to do that quite often. Look at the schedule too. I think being tested at Michigan is very nice. The test versus Vandy is also very nice and it's very winnable. Those 2 games really help set you up for success as the season goes on. You're playing lesser opponents at Utah versus Hawaii at Nevada. I couldn't think of a better way to end your September, and then obviously Nevada's in October. But it's a very it's a very nice segue into that meat and potatoes of your conference schedule. So I really like that. I don't know. I just look at UNLV. I see a lot of winnable games. I see a bright offense with bright mind coaching it, fascinating quarterback receiver duo. I just feel like there's a lot to like for a team that was so close last year but couldn't get over the hump. I think they'll be able to change it for the good this year. I think 5.5 the win total, or in my bookie, I think that's way too low. I like UNLV a lot. I think this is a dark horse team in the Mountain West. It's dark horse.
Yeah. No, I think the thing with UNLV is just how they lost a lot of talent to the portal in the NFL. So if they can, it's really a matter of how much they can recover from that. I mean, they lost Aiden Robbins, who's probably their best offensive player last year. Kyle Williams was right up there with him. Adam Plant on the edge. So if they can replace those guys adequately, I think they definitely have a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, and I like your point about the schedule, Liam. I mean, I think you look at this outside of at Michigan, at Air Force, and then maybe at Fresno or Wyoming at home. Every other game on here is winnable. It's maybe one of the easiest schedules in the Mountain West in terms of conference play, at least, avoiding Boise and San Diego State. Um, but my question, I mean, to you is the Barry Odom hire was very just intriguing to me for a lot of reasons. I mean, I'm a current Missouri student, so I do have opinions on Barry Odom. But regardless of his head coaching ability, I think he's a phenomenal defensive mind. And I think UNLV brings him in saying, we already have everything we need on offense, at least for the time being. Let's bring him in to fix the other side of the ball, and we can be a more complete team this year. Do you think that's what will happen? Or do you think Barry Odom, there was a lot of discontinuity when he was at Mizzou in a head coaching role? He stepped back to defensive coordinator role since then. Do you think back in a head coaching role that crops up again, or do you think he finds a good start in Las Vegas?
I think the good vibes are plenty infectious. I think that the offense is absolutely going to ball out, and that it's going to translate to the defense, just getting the stops that they need, playing better than people expect, keeping them in games for longer than people expect, and getting the offense to get going. Like, I truly believe that what Odin brings to the table complements what Marion's going to bring to the table so nicely. I look at someone like Cam Oliver in the secondary as someone that could break out and have a big year. Ricky Johnson's another strong corner. I think they have plenty of talented players. Maybe finding a very talented edge rusher would help a lot. Xavier Carter could be that guy. But yeah, at the end of the day, I do think UNLV on paper, when we're talking about their talent on both sides of the wall and how their schedule lines up, like, I think every game in conference that they have is winnable, except maybe the Air Force game. But when you get that late into the season, if you're as good as I think you're going to be, like, we can't say, oh, that's not a winnable game now. Like, just wouldn't make any sense. I think UNLV is going to prove a lot of people wrong. I think Owen's a great hire. Marion might be one done, might be on his way out for a head coaching gig or a P5 OC job after this year, but they've got the pieces. I know I'm being the old drum here, but they've got the dudes. They have the quarterback receiver to do it, and they're going to be must-watch TV.
UNLV national champions. You heard it here first on the
Pretty much, yeah.
podcast. Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, kind of moving a little bit away from UNLV, but sticking with kind of those. We moved on past Boise, touched on them enough, but the main contenders to the Broncos in the conference, and we can start it with kind of another dark horse trendy pick is Wyoming. Looking to field another with guys like Easton Gibbs returning, another elite defense this season. It's typical out there. It's just, will the offense catch up? Refrain from being one-dimensional as it usually is will be the key for Wyoming this season. The unfortunate part for them is that the schedule is incredibly front-loaded and not easy. You got Texas Tech at home week 1, at Texas week 3. App State comes to Laramie week 4, which is not going to be an easy game whatsoever. Then Fresno and Air Force right before a bye week. Coming out of that bye week, you get Boise State right after. It's a difficult path. They're really going to have to earn their way to a Mountain West title and to, in turn, potentially New Year's Six bowl berth. But I think it's a team that's capable of it just purely based off of this team. It's ugly. I think that'll be completely fine. I think they're more, as I touched on earlier, more than capable of being Texas Tech at home. I think they can take App State. I think they could give Texas, coming off that Bama game, I think they could at least scare Texas over in Austin as well. But playing Boise and Air Force both on the road, very difficult because it is a big home field advantage up in there in Wyoming. So likelihood that Wyoming kind of is able to pull off this gauntlet run and be able to make it into the Mountain West title game.
I think if there was a team to do it, they definitely fit the mold. Super strong defense, can't go without stating. Their offense, there's been question marks. There always has been, but I mean, I don't think it'll be a huge issue. They'll be able to move the ball on the ground. They've got strong players up front. The passing game, if they can get something going, it's better than nothing. But I mean, yeah, as you said, their schedule, they're gonna have to earn it. But I think that defense can definitely hold up with any team on the schedule.
I think the unfortunate thing for me is how my brain thinks, and this happened so often last year and the other day when I was talking about Troy in the Sun Belt preview. Having such an elite defense and a lackluster offense always just scares me. And I know that you steal more games like than I could possibly imagine, but just like I don't know, just in the moment, like you play Texas Tech, you play at Texas, you play App State. I think that those are just 3 losses. Like I don't think that their offense is going to be able to overcome what those other teams bring, and I don't think that their defense is good, but those are 3 really different offenses that are all very good. App State's going to take a big step in the right direction this season after the Chase Bryce era is finally over. So, like I just look at that, I think that those are 3 losses, and then I mean, you play Fresno State at Air Force, at Boise State versus Colorado State, at UNLV in succession. It like that's just so tough. The schedule's absolutely brutal. I hate the schedule. I like the team. I just don't think a team with this identity could go on the Mountain West. And I of course it could happen. I just personally don't think it could. And I think there's a reason why their win total is 6.5.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to believe. I'm sorry, but like I like Devon Harris and the Easton Gibbs, and they have the best kicker in the conference. So John Hoyland could kick a bunch of 55-yarders to throw the dagger into a bunch of teams. Then prove me wrong.
Just pick up a bunch of 12 to 6 wins. That's all they really need. But I do agree with you. I think that, I mean, you look at that schedule, there is a very real possibility that they begin 2-6 through those first 8 games, and in which case everything's to the wayside. So we're gonna learn everything about Wyoming pretty much within those first 4 weeks about how they're going to be this season, for sure.
If you want comparison, last year on the Sun Belt preview pod, Dan and I were going nuts over Georgia State, returned a lot, had decent defense, had a really good offense, but they started the season with South Carolina, North Carolina off the bat, lost both those games. Their coach goes out there and says, after we lost both those games, coming into the season with so much hype and expectations, we blew it. We lost all of our emotions. We mentally checked out. You don't want that to be the case, but if this is the case with Wyoming, like, we won't be surprised. You have, again, Texas Tech at Texas versus App State, the absolute epitome brutality of a non-conference schedule. Like, that's not what you want. It's just poor scheduling, but I'm glad that, I don't know, like, Texas is giving them money, so there's that. Like, ooh.
They're gonna payday. That's all they need. But yeah, kind of moving along onto another team that kind of has, as you said, the epitome of brutality non-conference schedule. Fresno State, another contender that's going to be really challenged early. At Purdue to open the season, Eastern Washington, always a pesky team to play back at home, and then at Arizona State week 3. Very tough opening stretch for them, for a team that's replacing a lot from some multi-year starters. Obviously, Jay Kaner, the most notable at quarterback. You bring in Mikey Keene from UCF as an experienced guy that can hopefully provide some keep the same level of explosiveness on offense while also adding some more running ability at the quarterback spot. There's still talent for sure on this roster, but it's largely unproven. Liam, you mentioned earlier that Fresno you were not very high on. Kind of what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, I think 8.5 is a ludicrous win total. I think that's going off the brand and not what this team actually is. You have a non-conference schedule that's at Purdue versus Eastern Washington, at Arizona State versus Kent State. Congrats, Kent State's 100% win. That's arguably the worst team in the entire country this season. The other 3 are not, like, those are all tough games. Eastern Washington's on the decline recently. They still play really good offense. They still throw a ball around the yard. Like, those 3 games to open your season are not easy. And I know that we're talking a lot about Mikey Keene, we talked to Jay Kaner before a few weeks before the draft a few months ago, and we asked them a fan question from Fresno State fan. It was like, "Wait, where are you expecting for Mikey Keene?" What was Jay Kaner's response? Immediately shuts that down and says, "We got a lot of good guys in the building: Logan Fife, Joshua Wood, blah blah blah." Like just going around naming every other quarterback that wasn't Mikey Keene, because Jay Kaner, a man of this program, that is the Fresno State program, didn't want, in my opinion, didn't want to see a guy, an outsider, come in and take the job from a guy that he helped mentor. So I don't know. Like I don't think Keene is the given QB1 throughout the entire season. Like I just don't think that's a thing. And I don't like what I saw from Logan Fife at all last season. I know he's Hayner's guy and everything, but I really didn't like what I saw from him at all. I was pounding the table for Jalen Henderson to get more reps. He doesn't ever get more reps. He ends up parlaying his lack of PT at Fresno State into a gig at Texas A&M. So it goes to show what the talent was there that they were keeping on the bench. I just really don't like Fresno State very much this season. There's a lot of players that like Cam Lockridge is an excellent talent. You look at Lavelle Bailey as well. I like Jalen Gill, who they bring in from Boston College. I like him as a receiver a lot. What you're going to see from him is a lot of what they did with Nico Remigio, was complimenting Jalen Cropper a bunch. So, like, I like that. I just don't think they have really good quarterback play. I know that they'll find something at running back. I'm not worried about that. And the schedule's just disgusting. Like, we talk about the non-conference, they still have to go at Wyoming, at Utah State, versus UNLV, versus Boise State, at San Jose State. You close your season at San Diego State. There's no weeks off aside from the Kent State, Nevada 2-week stretch where you're essentially playing two of the worst teams in the country. Like, I mean, Nevada's not near Kent State's level. Don't get me wrong. Nevada would beat Kent State by 48, but I think 8.5 is way too high of a win total. I don't get it. This is a team that has to prove themselves in a lot of areas. There's so many question marks. I just thinking that they could go out and win 9 wins right now on August 2nd is ludicrous in my opinion. I love Fresno State's program. I love Tedford. Love everything about this program. Great fan base. I'm sorry you guys are going to throw tomatoes at me, but like this is how I feel.
Yeah, the Kent State.
What was that?
The Kent State hatred every podcast is just
They're terrible.
uncalled
okay.
for, man.
Yeah,
We're
it's
coming
not
back to
uncalled
this a
for.
couple
It's
months
very
from now.
much. It's very much called for.
We need to set. If Kent State goes bowling, you have to do something.
They
like
can't go
some
bowling.
punishment.
They didn't go bowling last year with the best roster in the conference. Like they're not going to do it this year with one of the worst.
We need like
one of
a
the worst teams in the
Never
entire
know.
country. They couldn't go
72-hour
bowling
walk-off
last year
challenge.
with Dustin Crum, CFL legend, with Colin Schlee, who goes in there and helps out as well. They didn't go bowling with Devontae Walker and Dante Sebas, 2 Power 5 wide receiver talents who could go out there and do their thing in the NFL eventually, with Marquez Cooper, a transcendent talent at running back in the MAC, and Xavier Williams. Like, they ain't going to do anything this year. They are so bad. I know we're talking about the Mountain West. Kent State is so bad.
You know, I think I understand where that's coming from. The passion that you speak about last year's team with, you wanted much more out of that team. Is that why? Is that the issue here?
Yeah, they all got hurt and stuff, but they got ravaged by the portal and the coaching carousel. We're talking about the Mountain West, but Kent State always finds a way to sneak in there before they go on as well this season.
Oh, exactly.
One
We'll get
of us.
every conference.
We'll establish something.
But
You're
yeah,
welcome, Mountain West fans.
your Kent State coverage for the day. But moving back on, kind of flipping the script, another contender, Air Force. On the flip side of that, they have a very easy open of the season. Robert Morris, Sam Houston in Houston, Utah State at home. Then you pick it up at San Jose State, San Diego State. Air Force consistently you talk to many coaches across the country, especially the Mountain West, one of the toughest, teams to play just in terms of how, military academies in general, but especially Air Force, just how disciplined and consistent they seem to be year in and year out. Obviously dominant on the ground. And I've mentioned a couple times some of the changes coming to the triple option game and how that might affect them. But behind John Lee Eldridge and a host of other experienced players, this is a very strong team. I could see a legitimate argument that they are as good of a team, maybe not on paper, but on the field as Boise State once the season starts. Do you think they're my primary contender outside of my Wyoming love aside, they're my primary contender to Boise. Are they the same for you guys?
Yeah, I'm high on Air Force. I think they're a well-rounded team. The results speak for themselves over the last few years under Troy Calhoun, and yeah, it's a very interesting matchup because they're a contrasting team to Boise, but what they do well, they do very well, and I think that'll be a great matchup if we do get to see it in the conference championship game. But even then, we'll see it a week before either way.
Yeah, I could see a scenario where the season shakes out where Boise State stays afloat, and then you have Fresno State, Air Force, San Diego State, Wyoming, San Jose State, UNLV, Utah State, Colorado State, all just eating each other alive, and it's just an absolute mess. And then whoever gets to the Mountain West title game has like 8 or 9 wins, and it's not. I mean, probably eight wins. 9 might be too much. We're saying each other alive, but I mean, you look on paper at Air Force, and yeah, there's a lot to like. There's a very good team experience as always. We talked about Trey Taylor at the top, Thor at center. Tough last name to say. I'm sorry, Pagliong. Yeah, he's an excellent player. John Lee Eldridge is sick too. Schedule's nice, man. You should be 3-1 at minimum in non-conference. You might drop the game at Navy. I think Navy could be a little better than people expect. I think you should be able to beat Army, though. I think they'll regress. Sam Houston State, Robert Morris should be wins. I don't like looking at their schedule. They should stay afloat, man, but it's the Mountain West. Anything could happen. UNLV at Boise State 10-year season also gross.
Yeah, I do that. Your point is exactly on. We might have one contender that emerges with 9, 10 wins, but it does seem like a season in which there's too many kind of, not in a negative way, but middling contenders that aren't necessarily going to separate themselves. And I agree. I think they're going to end up just beating themselves up. Air Force will probably fall victim to that as well. We kind of moving along to another contender. We touched on a little bit already, San Diego State. In the past decade or so, probably not right out there with Boise, but on that second tier right below Boise in terms of just consistency and conference domination. They've fallen back a little bit in recent years. They like what they have with Jalen Maiden at quarterback. They feel like they finally have a playmaker back there that can make things happen. Defense is always going to be there. You can count on them running the ball well. But the schedule's rough. You look at this, we've talked a lot about schedules so far. A 4-game stretch of UCLA at Oregon State, Boise State, then at Air Force. I don't think we've talked about a worse 4-game stretch before that bye week. And you open up with Ohio, who's going to be a really tough team from the MAC as well. It's going to be difficult for a San Diego State team that isn't going to wow you with their offense, be able to outscore anybody, for them to consistently win a lot of these close games. You saw last year, it didn't. They lost a couple of close games without having really that explosiveness. So is this a season where San Diego State can surprise? They would be surprising everybody, I would say, by coming back and kind of reclaiming their crown. Do you think they're capable of that, or is this still a year where they're a step or two behind the top contenders? I'll start with you, Karen.
I mean, those first 6 games, like Idaho State's the one where you can say, okay, they'll probably win that. But even like if Ohio's the weakest team they're playing the first 6 games, that's not a very good thing. Ohio's got a strong team. UCLA, Oregon State, I don't think they beat either of those teams. Boise State, Air Force, probably not. So they're going to open the season in a pretty big hole and then work their way out of it with a somewhat easy final stretch of the year. I think they'll be okay. They're probably a better football team than their record might suggest, but I don't think this is the year for them.
Thank you for the slight positivity surrounding the MAC there. Ohio's very, very good, and it's going to be tough for San Diego State to beat them in the opener. Man, I don't know. Win total 6.5 over at my bookie for good reason. Schedule stinks, like in a bad way for them. Like schedule's tough. And they play dinosaur football, and they really haven't found anything on the offensive end with that in years past. I like Jalen Mayen. I like what he brings to the table. I like Mark Redman as well. You got to find a WR1. I don't know if it's going to, what number 40, whatever, or 90, whatever your WR1's going to be. But, like, that's a joke because all the receivers wear, like, impossibly weird numbers. But Raphael Williams, maybe he steps up, makes good plays. Makai Shaw. Like, you got to find something at receiver really bad. You can't keep winning in college football. You can't keep getting away with winning in college football when you don't have an alpha WR1. There's too much receiver talent in this entire world to get away with it, running the ball 66 times a game and doing it for 2.5 yards to carry. So figure out something in the passing game, and you really could transcend. But other than that, man, like, I don't know. I mean, you look at the defense. Cody Moon's an excellent transfer they got coming in from in conference. That's a nice get. Losing McMorris is tough. Take a little brag there, Karan. Dejan Malone, someone to look out for on the defense. Devon Celestine as well. Schedule's awful. It's just like, I mean, like when we said, like, I just truly believe that all these teams are going to eat each other alive. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think San Diego State's very good or whatever, but they still win 5-6 games, probably 6-7 games more likely, and just never be a good team.
Like, win 6 of the ugliest games you'll watch. Like 13,
Yeah,
13 to 5, 13 to 3,
oh
like
my
last second winners
Unless
in
you're
the heart of November.
unless you're a UNLV Mountain West fan, I don't think you're tuning in for much positivity today. But we got to be realistic.
What? I could have said a million good words about Boise State. I kept it simple.
That is true. That is, yes, Boise State as well. But yeah, but I agree with your point on how have you not. You're Southern California. I get that San Diego isn't the recruiting hotbed that LA is, but how have you not found a couple of star receivers in your time along with quarterbacks?
No, that's the thing. They've had good receivers. They don't utilize them because they play dinosaur football. They play with stegosauruses and brontosauruses.
And they got Brady Hope.
Standout NFL receiver Braxton Burmeister on the LA Rams.
Exactly, Elijah Cody.
What a
Las Vegas kid repping them. Mr. Matthews. Like, they've had guys. They've had tight end talent. They've had receiving talent, but they play offense that was set for like the 1880s. It's so bad.
And the unfortunate reality is that Brady Hoke is the head coach now, and that will likely not change, especially as I mentioned earlier. He's trying to get tight ends more involved, which might be a good thing, but also might slow down the offense some. So who knows with them? But for these last
Jalen Mann for what it's worth. I like Jalen Mann.
Mm-hmm, for sure. That he more than likely will not be the issue for that offense, if anything.
He's a product of the system.
Mm-hmm.
That stinks for him.
Exactly. But for these last 6 teams, I feel like we can kind of group them into 2 sections. Starting out, I think kind of San Jose State, Colorado State, Utah State reside along that same threshold of, if a couple of these question marks get answered in a positive way, they could be conference title contenders. If they go the opposite way, a bowl game is going to be tough to come by. What do we think about each of them? San Jose State, obviously, headlined by the offense in Cordero. Utah State just struggled with injuries last season coming off that Mountain West title game. Can they bounce back? And then Colorado State building something with Norvell. Out of these 3, who do you guys see as the strongest contender? And kind of how do you see all 3 of them bowling or no?
I think all 3 of them bowling is somewhat likely. San Jose State opens the year with USC Oregon State, which is rather unfortunate because they're a pretty good team. I still think they probably have the best shot out of those 3 teams to compete in the Mountain West, though.
Yeah, San Jose State's just non-conference kind of tough when you have the USC Oregon State, and then you go at Toledo as well. You have a stretch where you're playing at Toledo versus Air Force at Boise State. That's not kind at all. The schedule got to them last year, and it was just very difficult. Like, they were in that game against Auburn. Well, they were in pretty much every game they played, but the schedule was tough, and the schedule went out and prevented them from doing great things. They could have been better than the 7-5 they had. They went to a 5.5 this year. It's a common theme here with these Mountain West teams. It's a whole lot of mid with a lot of exciting talent, but the teams overall are pretty dang mid, and the odds makers realize that. Yeah, I'll also take this as a second to recognize. I said Dustin Crum played for Kent State last year. That was a bad brain fart in the moment.
You mentioned Colin Schley as well.
So I did. Yeah, that was a bad brain fart though. Kent State had my brain.
Okay, let's move on from Kent State once and for all.
Utah State though, like Utah State has a very intriguing game. Their 4th game versus James Madison. I think that's a game that we've really got to circle. It's a fascinating game between JMU going out there. It's a really good opportunity for Utah State to help them get prepared for the tough slate of the conference schedule. At Iowa, hey, 13 points is all you need to be. Oh, I don't quote me on that. I don't know.
Utah
I
State
think
beats Iowa
Utah
week
State,
one.
like
Means.
Utah State's going to be a lot better. I think than people realize. I think 5.5 is too low of a total. I think they have a lot of talent, especially again. Ike Larson's an NFL caliber safety. Cooper Legas is a pretty solid quarterback.
Yeah,
and
he gets the job done.
They'll find good talent at receiver as well. Terrell Vaughn stands out, but I think Utah State should soar over the 5.5. Maybe soar is like 7 wins or whatever, but they should get over that.
Yeah, I like Utah State as well.
Yeah. I think for me, Colorado State was the third one. I think kind of for me, I agree with you on San Jose State. The only thing is I see it as a type of thing where you can eat those USC and Oregon State games, maybe play one of them close, gain some momentum from that. I love the placement of their bye weeks in between Air Force and Boise State, and then right before they host Fresno and San Diego State. So there's potential there if they can survive those 2 early games without getting just kind of beat down from those losses. I think they can pull off some upsets, but I doubt they'll be consistent enough in those swing games. I think Utah State's similar in the swing game scenario to where, as we've said many times, just going to be beating each other up. But they're going to be competitive, I think, in every single game. Colorado State, that last team, I think probably the biggest. I could go to limit and say the biggest wild card in the conference this season potentially. It's a strange schedule for them for sure. Opening with Washington State bye week, then you get your rival Colorado on the road. You're going to learn a lot about this team early on, as well as having to go to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, of course, because why not? To play Bill Tennessee State. Exactly. So Colorado State, I think it's probably the team that I'm going to watch the closest, at least early on, because I'm really intrigued to see what we're going to get from them. But out of those 3, yeah, I think San Jose State probably has the best chance to really surprise some people.
Yeah, I think calling Colorado State the biggest wild card in the conference is very fair. Again, common theme here: the schedule's it's weird, it's tough. But as someone that religiously watched Nevada football under Jay Norvell before he betrayed their hearts and left them in cold blood to go and rep the green out there at Colorado State, the offense is exciting, man. With Coach Mummy, like it's exciting, and they've what you're gonna see. They've got all these receivers, as I talked about earlier. Justice Ross Simmons is someone that's going to break out. I think you could look at maybe like a kind of a Romeo. He's going to be the Romeo Dobbs, or rather Dobbs, as it is nowadays in the NFL. And he didn't tell us when he was in Nevada. Romeo Dobbs. Justin Ross Simmons is going to be that for Jay Norvell. Torrey Horton is just going to more of that. I don't know, Elijah Cooks-esque big receiver that's always going to win Moss people. Don't do that with your eyes, Karan. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying like what Norvell had at Nevada. That's all I'm saying. Dylan Goffney is a very solid transfer as well, coming in from SMU. I think he's had a lot of promise and hasn't really ever got to showcase that. So I think you get him in there. It's 3 really good receivers that you have. My question is, Clay Millen, can you look better than you did last year? Because last year was not exciting in the slightest, man. Like that was so much hype we heard about Clay Millen for months and months. It was deeply and rooted in our brains that Clay Millen was going to be the next Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I'm guilty on that one.
Yeah, like it was
this time last year, exact same podcast. I talked to Clay Millen.
We are hearing about this guy being like a Peyton Manning, like renaissance of the quarterback position, and it was so disappointing. And now that he could get past those lofty expectations, come in here clean slate year 2, like let's see something for real. Show us what everyone believed in, and yeah, Carlos, they could figure out something. They really can't figure something out. I just hate that Norvell did Nevada dirty like that.
Speaking of Clay Millen, I mean, his development's going to be big. They brought in Carson Strong as an assistant recently. I did see that. So
we have to
talk about
that. Perhaps
he becomes the next Carson Strong.
I didn't know we were allowed to talk about that. I was so happy when I saw that. Jay Norvell won me over again with that. The Carson Strong pickup. You get a potential Super Bowl winning quarterback in your house to help develop Clay and some of these other guys. That's excellent. I think 4.5 is too low of a total for Colorado State. I understand where they're coming from, but again, it's just so much mediocrity in this conference. Why can they not win 6 or 7 games?
Man, I'm going to be watching Colorado State and Nevada both very closely, purely for your reactions this season.
Nevada's bad.
Yeah. Well, I was transitioning into the the
You'll
bottom
all watch
three
them.
of the conference, all three of them kind of in unique, very difficult spots right now. Nevada being one of them, Hawaii being another one. Timmy Chang kind of still trying to find their identity over there. And then you've got New Mexico, who has really struggled. The roster is just still depleted. It does not look like a Power Five football team when they get off the bus. The three of these teams, do any of them take a step forward, show some signs of life? Even for any of them, I would venture even 4 wins is probably success this year for them. Who's
I
most
think New
capable of
Mexico.
that?
I
Yeah.
think New Mexico is slightly better than the credit the rep they've garnered over the last few years.
I
Not to say
agree.
that isn't undeserved. They suck for a very long time, but I do think they're a slightly better team. They brought in Bryant Vincent and Dylan Hopkins from UAB, who I think automatically will make their offense at least serviceable. And then on defense, I mean, they're not bad. I talked about Dante Martin earlier. He's a strong DB. They've got a deep defensive back room. They're not a great team. They're not a contender, but I think they're probably the best of those three.
I was expecting to get absolutely ripped if I went out here and also said New Mexico, but of those three, they're by far the most exciting team. Like, you could actually watch a New Mexico game and come away with a smile on your face saying something that you just watched. Dante Martin's a stud. They've definitely they've got guys like Caleb Medford at receiver too, DJ Washington. Like, they could actually excite, as crazy as it sounds. Dylan Hopkins has an arm where he could throw it like Uncle Rico. Yeah, like they've actually got really solid talent, and New Mexico's uniform game is also criminally underrated. What can we do though, New Mexico? What can we do out here? Because you're not beating A&M.
What Brian Vincent did last year at UAB was pretty underrated. I mean, they led a really productive offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they ranked 33rd in the country. I wrote about them in the preview magazine. I'm not saying New Mexico is going to randomly just out of nowhere end up being like a top 40 offense, top 50 offense in the country, but they are going to be a lot better. They have some productive receivers. Brought in a guy from Alabama State, Jeremiah Hickson, who's had a productive career. It's just like, I think they're a well-rounded team, and I might get a chance to talk about it later, but I'd take the over 4 wins. I think they'll go 5 or 6.
As you talk about Vincent and the offense, something that we're obviously going to see is that nasty running game. So yeah, Andrew Henry transfers in, but look out for Christian Washington to continue what he was able to do. Like, Christian Washington could absolutely end up being a dude in this Vincent offense. And yeah, I think it's the stigma of this is New Mexico. The only good stuff that has happened in New Mexico football is if you or I or someone listening played NCAA football and start up a dynasty with New Mexico and turn them into a beast. Yeah, like that's the positive takeaways that people have from New Mexico. I'm with Karan. Like, I would honestly take over 3.5 wins. You should beat Tennessee Tech. Dylan's gonna probably punch me in the face the first time he sees me for this. I don't see why they can't beat New Mexico State at UMass too. 3 winnable games right there. Karan, tell him. Hawaii, Nevada, there's wins on the schedule, baby.
Are we saying this is the 2021 or 2022 UNLV of the 2023 Mountain West? Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe.
I think that's a fair comparison, best case scenario.
But yeah, with New Mexico, they've always kind of struck me, and y'all are kind of on the same wave. They've struck me as a team that like everybody would want to cheer for and wants to see do good, but at this point, everybody's just kind of given up on them. But I do agree. I think more well-rounded than those other 2 teams. I think Hopkins also coming in just as a guy that's played in a lot of football, comes from a program that was used to, competing for conference championships. I think that mindset will also help just the team as a whole with what he'll bring in with that. So yeah, I think I do like New Mexico. I can see those 4 wins for sure.
Dude, you want to know how deep New Mexico is? We didn't even mention Luke Weislang.
Yeah, I was.
Wow, what a deep team, guys! 6 wins.
Very
6
deep.
wins.
6 wins. Is this going to be their 14th bowl game since 1892? Is that what's happening this year?
New Mexico Bowl champs. Scooters Frisco Bowl.
Yeah, where else can they play besides, the New Mexico Bowl? I feel that's their. You have nothing else to look forward to, I feel like.
I have a bit of a hot take, I think, with that. I hate like lumping in Hawaii with the Hawaii Bowl every year and like Louisiana with the New Orleans Bowl or whatever. I hate that stuff. New Mexico State with New Mexico Bowl. Like, no, let these teams go out there and venture off into a different part of the country, please. Hawaii should not be playing in the Hawaii Bowl every single year. Like every time that they're bowl eligible, they're playing in the Hawaii Bowl. You remember growing up as a kid, the Sheraton Hawaii Bowl dominated by Hawaii. Figure it out, change it. They should be going on the mainland.
December 23rd. Yeah, every single year. Yeah, I hope for as the players, they must just get bored of that. The coaching staff too, I would imagine. But
I agree. New Mexico Bowl should be shooting for something much bigger than the New Mexico Bowl.
Yeah,
New Mexico should be like
get an SEC team in there.
Yeah, New Mexico should be shooting for the College Bowl.
Oh, exactly, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, so kind of handles our team by team breakdown. We've touched on this topic a little bit, but we'll just kind of go rapid fire with it. I'll start with mine. Just the one team that could be the surprise dark horse team. And looking at it now, Wyoming, we've talked up a little bit, might not be the dark horse per se, but they're not being considered as one of the main contenders. I think personally, I'll touch on it a little bit later. Wyoming defense is going to be beyond elite. And I think that, frankly, they are just going to live and die with that defense, and it will carry them to at least 8 wins. And as we touched on again, that might be good enough to make the Mountain West title game this year, and it probably will be. So I'll pick Wyoming. If the offense can add anything, if they can keep pace, that'll be great, and they might beat Boise out for the title. But I think their defense can get them through, even with that schedule. I think they'll test a lot of teams that people don't expect them to. Yeah, Liam, your pick?
UNLV. I talked about. Yeah. I just have to go. I talked about way too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Utah State. I talked about them earlier. We know what they're capable of under Blake Anderson. And I mean, with Utah State, it feels like every other year they kind of have a good year. Even going back to like when Jordan Love was there, they were good. Then they had a disappointing year. Then they were decent, really bad, and they won the conference just out of nowhere. So I think this might not be a conference championship winning season, but they will be a solid team, 7 to 8 wins maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It definitely seems like a team that kind of alternates season to season almost in a way. But yeah, moving on, kind of probably my favorite bit of these podcasts is our hot takes for the conference in this season. I'll start off with my 3, and it's been a theme of pretty much my entire episode. I think Wyoming is going to have a top 10 defense nationally statistically. Might not even be the hottest take in the world, but I think, you're going to see them end to end be up there. I'll go on a limb, and Mikey Keene might not even end up being the starter. Who knows at this point, but I'll say Fresno. They shock people. They field another great offense. I think the defense maybe holds them back in some regards in some games, but I can see that offense again being among the best in the conference, potentially the best in the conference. And then I've got Colorado State with a winning season, whether that be a bowl win and get to 7-6, or they end up 7-5 regular season. I can see it either way. After 3-9 last season, I think they end up with a winning season this time around.
Or you want to go?
No, you go.
All right, okay. So I had to get this off my chest, man. We haven't talked about Hawaii really this whole time. So my first hot take, I've been waiting for it. I think Braden Shager is going to have a nice season in Hawaii. He's the quarterback there. Good build, 6'3", 220. He's flashed over the years despite how bad Hawaii is as a team. It's on and off. Their offense, you can't really expect much from them, but I do really think he's a solid quarterback. He's much better than the team they've put around him. They've got some targets from the hit. Jalen Waltall is a guy like Jonah Pinoque. I wouldn't be surprised if Braden Shager he has a nice season. That's a guy that I'm looking out for. And then my other 2, I think UNLV fields a top 2 to 3 offense in the conference. Based on how we've talked about them today, that isn't even shocking. And my last one, I think New Mexico.
Man.
Yeah, and I think New Mexico hits the over on wins. We talked about that earlier. I'm higher than them than most.
All right, my first one is like I kind of do like Brian Traeger too. I just think the team that they've surrounded him with is absolutely garbage.
Yeah.
3.5 is a monstrous total for them to overcome. I would go like Hawaii is like a 2-win team, man. So I that's not even a hot take or bold prediction. I'm just saying probably bet the under there. I think Nevada, though, could very well be dead last in this conference. I think that qualify for a bold prediction there. Nevada last in the conference.
That's
cool.
So.
We'll roll with that. Someone out there is going to win a conference game with under 90 yards of total offense. It's going to be gross to disgusting. You're going to hate watching it till you love tweeting the sickos committee about it. It could be Wyoming, San Diego State. Who knows? Air Force, maybe? Oh, man.
I'll place my bet on San Diego State being that team.
Who knows who it's going to be, but they're going to win a game with 90 yards or less of total offense. And then, oh, shoot, my last one. Give me Ricky White has 12 plus receiving touchdown. I think he's going to go crazy. I think he had 4 last year. So can we count 12 as a hot take bowl prediction thing?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'll give it to you.
Thanks.
Definitely give it to you. I'll pick my Wyoming team to be that under 90-yard. I think that screams
That's
Cowboys.
so gross. That's just so gross.
In the brown and mustard uniforms too. There's nothing better.
They win it 18-14 because John Boylan didn't miss a field goal.
Yes.
Easton
6 for 6
to win it.
Yes. He goes, all from 50 plus yards as well, those field goals. Yeah. But yeah, to kind of wrap things up here though, we'll each kind of go through our championship game predictions and a bunch of our superlatives for the season as well. I'll go ahead and start off. My pick is probably one of the more chalky picks, but I've got Boise over Air Force. I think Air Force beats them in that season finale, but I think Boise returns the favor the following week, ends up winning it. I've got Troy Calhoun at Air Force, Coach of the Year. Taylon Green, Offensive Player of the Year in the conference, just with what he's going to be able to do, both running and throwing. Muhammad Kamara, who I mentioned earlier at Colorado State, I think he's going to have a monster season and emerge into top 3, top 4 round pick in the NFL draft potentially, as long as he stays healthy. Newcomer of the Year, I've talked a lot about already, Mikey Keene, assuming he wins the job. I think he'll be in a good system for his skill set. And then Game of the Year, I think Boise at Fresno State. They've been, quote unquote rivals for a couple years now, just being both top of the conference. I think week 9 they play another classic in Fresno. Although I do think Boise comes out on top in that one. But Liam, who do you have coming out on top?
I'll let Karan go first.
Likes the best for last. Okay. All right.
I have to say more stuff about Boise State, so I'm just gonna let you guys talk first.
That's fair.
Okay, I'll stop the Boise train briefly, and I think Air Force beats them. Going into those November, December games, Air Force is very hard to beat, especially when you're playing them back to back, which is the projected scenario here. Air Force might not take that final week of the regular season game, but I do like them in the championship. I think Boise is going to run into a wall there. Their high-powered offense is definitely a more dynamic alternative to Air Force's traditional football. But I do prefer the old school hard mouth football in this situation.
You can go through the rest of yours as well if you'd like.
Okay. Coach of the Year.
Give Liam the full floor.
Yeah, all right. Coach of the Year, I'll go Troy Calhoun, Air Force. I think they win it all. He's a legend of the game, legend of the conference. Offensive Player of the Year, I'll go Torrey Horton, wide receiver, Colorado State. Probably the best offensive skill player in the conference, best offensive player overall. He's a great player. We think Colorado State's offense is going to be very explosive this year, and he's going to be a large part of it if so. Defensive Player of the Year, Easton Gibbs, linebacker, Wyoming. Mo Kamara is a guy that I'm very high on, but I think Gibbs is just he's a monster with the tackles. He's a very solid linebacker at Wyoming, who's quietly linebacker if you look at their resume these past few years. Gibbs has a good chance to become their all-time leading tackler, and I would assume he probably leads the conference in tackles. That's a safe bet. Newcomer of the Year, sticking with Wyoming, Harrison Whaley. I talked about him earlier. He was very productive in Northern Illinois. He'll have a chance to run the ball a lot in the Wyoming offense that revolves around running the football. And then, are we doing Game of the Year as well? Yeah, I'll go Fresno versus San Jose State. I talked about them earlier. These aren't two teams that we think are going to make the championship game or anything, but they're two very explosive offenses, two teams that have proven to be contenders in recent years. I think they'll put up a good fight.
Yeah, Game of the Year heavily depends on how you interpret that and define it.
Yeah.
I went Game of the Year for the fans. A lot of offense in Colorado State UNLV in week 8, points and bunches. Jalen Gill's my newcomer of the year, wide receiver at Fresno State. He's been at Ohio State. He's been at Boston College. He's going to be thrown into that same role that we saw Nico Remigio carve last year at Fresno State after he came from Cal. So I really like Jalen Gill, what he brings to the table. Easton Gibbs, linebacker, Wyoming, also my defense player of the year. Taylon Green, quarterback, Boise State, also my offense player of the year. Coach of the year, I went with Barry Odom at UNLV because I have Boise State beating UNLV in the conference championship game. And Boise State fans, don't be mad at us. We have time to talk about Boise State. It was planned like this all along. Wrote about Boise State in the season preview magazine. I am incredibly high on this team. Realistically, I said that they go 10-2, ceiling of 11-1. I just don't think they beat Washington, but I think the game is closer. Again, the schedule is tough, but we got to talk about the team, and I don't think we gave this team the justice that they deserve and the amount of names that they have. Like we talked about Ashton, we talked about George Alani a little bit. John Brace Dubar is someone else that could get into the mix at the running back position, a true freshman that is absolutely exciting. He is also NFL caliber. Having him and Ashton next few years is going to be disgusting. They lose Latrell Caples. We just recently learned that he's out for a season. Stephen Cobbs is an exciting talent that they just didn't utilize at all last season. You need to look out for him. But a deep name that I would have actually loved to pick for my breakout sleeper pick had I remembered that Caples out for the year, reading that yesterday. Prince Strawn, brother of Super Mike Strawn, who got a gig with the Colts in the NFL. Prince Strawn's a monster out of the Bahamas. He gray shirted last year. I believe he's 6'5". I could be wrong on that, but he's a menacing presence, a tower that you want to throw the ball to. Great catch radius. He's going to be thrown into an even bigger role this season, so look out for Prince Strawn to do big things. I think he could be Boise State's WR2 this season. The defense, though, is why this team is so exciting and why, like, I had to give them this time to talk about them. Like, their secondary is extremely, like, the quality is so good. You have Rodney Robinson, you have Jalen Clark, a versatile corner and safety who just plays everywhere and does things so well. Alexander Tubner, Markel Reed, Sayo Ladipo, Zion Washington, Kanoa Kanihi, Kaniho. Like, the secondary is disgusting. You talk about DJ Strom at linebacker. This team just has dudes everywhere, and I think when you're looking at the group of five as a whole, Boise State has one of the best rosters in all the group of five. It's just, can they overcome that schedule? And I really think that they can. Not to like go way in too deep on this, but I did want to bring up his name is Bush Hampton, former quarterback at Boise State, gets into an offense coordinator role his first year at Boise State. Now you're going to see him implement a Kyle Shanahan-esque running scheme into this Boise State team. So that's going to be nice and refreshing to see in the college game. He worked closely with Shanahan, and I think that's going to be very impactful for them. All comes down to how Taylor Green develops, and I think he can throw the ball quite well. So yeah, I just had to say more words about Boise State because I don't think we got to do his team justice.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, is it even a bold take to say that, at least on paper entering the season, this is the best Boise State team since the 2016 Fiesta Bowl champions? I think, at least looking top to bottom, I mean, yeah, just one of the most complete rosters you'll see on a group of five team, and probably their best chance at getting back to a New Year's Six bowl game that they've had since. I mean, you look at 12-2 in 2019. Yes, we lost that Las Vegas Bowl. I think this team has the potential to be better. I mean, really excited to see how they. I'm excited to see how they dominate teams on the ground. I think obviously what everybody's talking about is that Washington passing attack versus the running game in week one. It's going to be real contrast in styles. And frankly, if I give Boise a better chance of beating Washington than I might someone like Oregon walking into Seattle, just because of the contrast in styles and stuff along those lines. So, yeah, I mean, I think you pointed out, though, the X factor is going to be Green's development, the passing game. If that offense is, very efficient and two-dimensional, and defenses can't key on the run game, it'll be impossible for teams to score with them against that defense. So, yeah, I like Boise to run away with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a massive believer in Taylor Green. I was from the moment I saw him insert the game against Oregon State last year. A few plays later, rushes for a 74-yard touchdown, and then there began the quarterback battle. Offensive line play is also something that they got to be better at, but because they couldn't keep Hank Bachmeier upright, so he was always hurt, just dealing with injuries. And just Taylor, the blessing there, though, is that he's able to run away with stuff and avoid it, so that's great. But I really think he's going to take leaps forward as a passer, and I think he's going to be one of the scariest players in all group of five football. I like Boise State to go 11-1. I really do. I could see them losing week one and then just around the table. I think they're that good of a team, but the schedule's rough, man. Like, there's a world where they go 7-5. That's possible, but I want to live in that world. I want to live in a world where Boise State is all the way back.
I think it's that. Yeah, that depth is going to be tested. Is going to be the biggest part, and they're built for it. But we'll have to see if they kind of can survive it. Is that enough words on Boise State, Liam? Or do you think the fans will still be unhappy?
No, more on Kent State next.
More on Kent State. Sweet. We're actually next week gonna have a full podcast episode dedicated to Kent State. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a great one. But besides that, thank you guys again for listening to the Transportal CFB podcast presented by No Context CFB. Feel free to leave some of your picks for the Mountain West as well as your hot takes in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to follow Transportal CFB on all of our social medias, which will be in the description. And be sure again to check out the 2023 College Football Preview magazine. Again, thank you, Liam and Karan, for joining me. And we are only now just a couple weeks away from the end of talking season.